In the multi-million-dollar corporate theater of modern Formula One, team synergy is supposed to operate like, well, an absolute science. Engineers design aerodynamic floor matrices, managers run endless pit stop simulations, and drivers, they're explicitly ordered to respect the collective stability of the garage above their own individual egos. But when you compress two hyper-competitive stars into the exact same front-row machinery, conventional discipline is violently thrown out the window. Yesterday afternoon, under the blinding heat of the Hungarang, the 2026 F1 calendar reached an absolute boiling point. McLaren's defending world champion Lando Norris didn't just claim his first Grand Prix victory of the season, he literally lit a match and dropped it directly onto his own team's foundation. What was supposed to be a dominant, calculated double podium for the Woking squad transformed into a toxic weekend of passive-aggressive radio wars, an active on-track backmarker collision, and a jaw-dropping team intervention that has left the paddock in absolute shock. The text lines are buzzing, the managers are completely scrambled, and the internal harmony at McLaren has been permanently set on fire. So let's dive right into this explainer and break down the inside story of the night Lando Norris broke team orders. To really grasp the gravity of this situation, you just have to hear the pure defiance echoing over the team radio. While leading the race, Lando Norris was explicitly told to surrender his position to his teammate, Oscar Piastri. And his response, "You mean you won't let me? I'm miles faster." He then audaciously followed up by claiming he'd pull out a 10-second gap with no tires. This wasn't just some standard strategic disagreement. No, this was a defending world champion openly refusing a direct, coordinated instruction from the pit wall, right there in real time. Listen to the intense tug-of-war happening at 200 miles per hour. On one side, you've got Will Joseph, Norris's race engineer representing corporate discipline. He's saying, "We need you to save tires, and we want to let Oscar through." It's calm, it's methodical, it's all about the team's baseline strategy. But on the other side, you have Norris operating on pure driver instinct and ego, completely rejecting the premise that he needs to manage his pace or yield. This standoff is the absolute crux of our explainer today. But how on earth did we get to a point where McLaren had to literally beg their lead driver to slow down? Section 1. The catalyst. Rewind to turn 2. To fully comprehend the sheer psychological friction that defined this Grand Prix, we have to look directly at the opening 60 seconds of the race. Norris started beautifully from pole position, looking to establish immediate spatial dominance down the long straight. But his teammate Oscar Piastri, well, he had a completely alternative script in mind. Launching an aggressive high-velocity attack into the opening complex, Piastri executed a breathtaking cutback maneuver at turn 2, completely catching Norris off guard to capture the lead. And from that exact second, the race transformed into an absolute pressure cooker. Norris, trapped in the dirty air of his teammate's rear wing, immediately began radiating frustration across the team comms. He aggressively pleaded with his race engineer, demanding to be ushered through and claiming his baseline pace was vastly superior. But McLaren command stood completely firm. They flatly denied the world champion's request and instructed both drivers to preserve their tires. The institutional message was crystal clear. You will sit down, you will hold station, and you will not compromise the garage.
Section 2. The strategic undercut.
Now, the absolutely crucial point here is understanding exactly why McLaren flipped their own drivers in the first place. See, McLaren was facing a serious threat from Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari charging up right behind them. Usually, standard procedure is to pit the leading driver first, but McLaren decided to pit Lando Norris, who was in the second-place car on lap 46, to protect against an undercut from Hamilton. Obviously, this gave Norris the massive advantage of fresh tires a full lap earlier than his teammate. The team's logic was actually quite simple. Secure the 1-2 finish first, and then safely swap the cars back on track to reinstate Piastri as the rightful leader. Easy, right? Well, look how quickly this corporate plan totally evaporated. Piastri had safely pitted earlier on lap 33. Then, on lap 46, Norris pits to cover Hamilton. Because of that lightning-fast fresh tire outlap, when Piastri emerged from his own second stop, Norris had leapfrogged him right into the lead. By lap 48, McLaren gets on the radio and politely asks Norris to re-establish the order at his convenience, but as we already know, Norris had absolutely zero intention of doing so. He had track position and he was taking off. Section 3. Compounding disasters. Let's analyze the microscopic technical friction that completely flipped the race matrix on its head just past the midway mark. Fresh from emerging from that secondary round of pit stops, having unjustly lost the lead to his teammate's undercut, Piastri encountered an absolute wall of heavy backmarker traffic in the first sector. This wasn't just frustrating, it was actively destroying his race metrics. And it all culminated in a highly unusual and completely unnecessary collision with Carlos Sainz's lapped Williams chassis. As if that wasn't enough to completely shatter his afternoon, Piastri ultimately suffered a race-ending gearbox failure with just 13 laps remaining. Talk about a nightmare scenario. Literally everything that could go wrong did. And honestly, nothing brilliantly illustrates the boiling point inside Piastri's cockpit quite like his radio traffic. Dealing with the sheer frustration of the team's strategy and then getting tangled up with a backmarker, Piastri completely blew a fuse, screaming over the radio at Sainz to get out of the way. It's a really stark reminder of the massive, intense pressure these drivers are under when the team's internal synergy just collapses around them. But Lando Norris doesn't play the game of passive compliance either. Driven by pure, unadulterated ego, the British star pushed his machinery way past the safe boundaries of the tire management protocol. On lap 29, while sticking to the gearbox of his teammate like glue, Norris pushed the limits way too far through the high-speed sweeping arc of turn 4, losing adhesion and suffering an innocent off-track excursion onto the dusty exit tracking strips. It was a minor visual error, for sure, but it triggered an immediate, severe corporate backlash over the airwaves. Realizing that Norris was actively cooking his tires purely to make a baseline statement to the garage, his race engineer delivered a brutal, public scolding. The engineer strictly ordered him to settle down, explicitly stating that the team suspected he was simply trying to show off how much quicker he was than the leader. It was an unprecedented, highly embarrassing regulatory intervention broadcasted to millions of fans worldwide, a very clear sign that the technical walls separating the drivers from absolute management collapse had completely dissolved. Section 4. The Fallout and PR Spin. Despite all that intense insubordination we just analyzed, the official stance from McLaren team principal Andrea Stella was, well, quite different. He publicly claimed that the competition between the two McLaren drivers was all fair and it was great racing. He even praised their respectful approach. It is just a fascinating juxtaposition, right? The internal data and radio communications clearly show a team at war with its lead driver, but the corporate messaging immediately steps in, attempting to smooth over the cracks and project absolute team harmony. And you can really see this evolution in Norris himself. Immediately post-race, the adrenaline is sky high, and he is totally unrepentant, saying he wanted to win, and certainly had much, much better pace. He felt entirely justified. But fast forward a few days to the lead-up of the Belgian Grand Prix, and the tone shifts dramatically. Norris publicly admitted he was not proud of ignoring the team orders, and acknowledged he didn't handle the situation well. The corporate reality of Formula One clearly caught up with the heat of the moment. So why does this internal friction matter so much? Because of one absolutely crucial number, 31. Despite the total nightmare in Hungary, Oscar Piastri actually leads Lando Norris by 31 points in the 2026 driver standings. But think about this for a second. Had Piastri simply ignored the team's initial orders to hold station, or if McLaren hadn't tried to micromanage those pit stops, that gap could easily be 37 points. Every single point is crucial, and McLaren is actively risking their own drivers taking points off each other. Because when we zoom out to the wider 2026 championship context, McLaren isn't even fighting for the very top spot right now. Mercedes' Kimi Antonelli is currently dominating the standings, sitting a full 50 points clear of Ferrari's Lewis Hamilton. McLaren has built an incredibly fast race car this season, perhaps the absolute fastest on the grid right now, but they are tangled up in their own papaya rules, while Mercedes and Ferrari are looking at the bigger picture. Which leaves us with the ultimate question for this explainer. You have two incredibly fast drivers, a car entirely capable of winning, but a pit wall that seems completely unable to control the egos inside those cockpits. So will these toxic papaya rules and internal radio wars ultimately cost McLaren their shot at the 2026 World Championship? It's a truly fascinating dynamic, and one that is practically guaranteed to unfold dramatically over the rest of the season. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this breakdown made the complexities of the Hungarian Grand Prix crystal clear. Keep a very close eye on that McLaren garage, folks. The fireworks are just getting started.